Hi, fifth graders, and welcome back to Chapter 4. Today we are working with Lesson 4.7 over multiplying decimals. This lesson can be found on page 271 in our textbooks. The standard that we are working with today is still under Number and Operations in Base 10, 5.7. The standard states that I can solve decimal problems to hundredths using strategies, concrete models, or drawings. I can explain my reasoning in written form. So what we are going to be doing today is taking a decimal times a decimal, and our essential question is asking what strategies can you use to place a decimal point in a product? So underneath the connect, you can use what you have learned about patterns and place value to place the decimal point in the product when you multiply two decimals. So back when you did lesson 4.1, where we were multiplying and swooping our decimals, we knew that when we took any number times 1, it would always give us that same exact number. So if I take 1 times 1/10, that does equal 1/10. Now, if I take 1/10 times 1/10, I have a 1 digit behind the first 1/10 decimal and another digit behind the next decimal of 1/10. So that means that there needs to be two decimal place values within the answer. And remember, when multiplying by 1/10, you swoop to the left. So from the end, I have 2 swoops to the left, and that's why my decimal is now giving me the answer of 1/100th. And then for the next pattern, 1/100th times 1/10, well, I have 2 digits behind the first decimal, and then for the second decimal, I have 1 digit. So that gives me a total of 3 digits behind decimal place values. So from the end of the 1, swooping 1, 2, 3 decimal place values, that does give me the final answer of 1,000th. So we need to remember when a number is multiplied by a decimal, the decimal point moves 1 place to the left in the product for each decreasing place value being multiplied. So for both factors today, we will have decreasing place values that we will need to be swooping to the left. Under Unlock the Problem, it says a male leopard seal is measured and has a length of 2 8/10 meters. A male elephant seal is about 1 5/10 times as long. What length is the male elephant seal? So in order to figure this out, we do need to multiply our 1 5/10 times the 2 8/10. So just like when we were multiplying whole numbers by decimals, we treat both decimals as whole numbers as we multiply. So they just took it as 28 times 15. They solved and got 420. Now, because both of our factors have decimals in them, we now have to count how many total decimal place values we have between the two factors. So the 2 8/10, notice there is 1 decimal place value, and the 1 5/10 has 1 decimal place value. So that gives me a total of 2 decimal place values that my answer has to have. So when I rewrite that 420, I now can place the decimal behind, going from behind the 420. So swooping now 2 places, 1, 2, it places my decimal in between the 4 and the 2. Again, we have to add together both decimal place values between the two factors. So if each factor has 1 decimal place value, that means my answer has to have a total of 2. So we always have to count that, and if I count 2 place values over, the decimal point would have a 100th value in my answer. And when I have that decimal place, that would tell me it would be 4 20/100ths, or I could also say 4 2/10 if I dropped that 0. Moving on to the next page, on page 272, You can use an estimate to place the decimal point in the product. However, this might be confusing for some people. You can't always just count the number of digits your decimal place value has to have. So if I was taking 7 8/10 times 3 1200ths, I would have to round both of them to their nearest whole number. So for 7 8/10, the whole number is the ones place. The 8 does tell my 7 to bump up 1, so I would round that one up to 8. And again, rounding to the nearest whole number, the 3 is in your ones place, and the 1 tells your 3 to stay the same. So I would keep that as a 3. And 8 times 3 does give me 24. Now, multiply as you would with your whole numbers again. Remember, whenever we set these up, we set the decimal on the top factor that has the most digits, multiply like you have two whole numbers, and then you would place your decimal. So, for the 312 times 78, 8 times 2 is 16, carry the 1. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. And 8 times 3 is 24. Cross off everything that you were finished with, drop a 0, and then multiply the 7 out. So 7 times 2 is 14, carry your 1. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 1 is 8. And 7 times 3 is 21. Now we need to add both partial products together. So 6 plus 0 is 6. 9 plus 4 is 13, carry my 1. 8 plus 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13, carry my 1 again. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 1 is 4, and then bring down my 2. So if you recall from our estimate, we said it would be about 24. So this is what they mean. If you would round, you would know that you would have a 2-digit whole number in front of your decimal. So you could either know that you would have that 2-digit whole number and then place your decimal, or what we did in the first problem on the previous page, if we write that whole number answer down, we can count that there are 2 digits behind the top factor's decimal, and there's 1 digit behind the bottom factor's decimal. So if I would add those two together, I would get a total of 3 decimal place values that my answer has to have. So from the end, 1, 2, 3 to the left, and that does place the decimal in between the 4 and the 3. So either method would get you the correct answer. You just have to make sure you are doing either method in the proper form. So I do know if I would multiply 7 8/10 times 3 1200ths, I would get the answer of 24 336 thousandths. So under the share and show, numbers 1 and 2, they already have the answers for the whole number problem. Now we have to go ahead and place our decimals. So for number 1, I know that the top factor has 2 digits behind its decimal, so therefore that one I would write a 2 beside. The bottom factor, I have 1 digit behind the decimal, so write a 1. Add that together for how many decimal place values you need to have. So 2 plus 1 gives me 3. I always circle this number so it doesn't get blended in with my final answer. So I know that there should be 3 decimal place values in my product. So from the end of the answer, 1, 2, 3 to the left places my decimal in between the 5 and the 0. So 5 68 thousandths would be my answer. Now for number 2, using the estimating method, the rounding to the nearest whole number, the 6 is my whole numbers place. The 8 does tell my 6 to bump up to a 7, so that's how they got the 7. For the 1 2/10, the 1 is in my whole number place value. The 2 does tell my 1 to stay the same, so that is how they have this 1. So for my estimate, 1 times 7 I know is 7. So therefore, that tells me I should have a single-digit whole number with my answer. So that tells me to place the decimal in between the 8 and the 1 because the 8 would be in the ones place and then the rest of it would be in the decimal place value. You could double check that by showing that the top factor has 1 decimal place value, the bottom factor has 1 decimal place value. Adding those together would give me a total of 2 decimal place values in my answer. So that does match what I had from my estimate. Moving on to 3, 4, and 5, we do have to solve each of these problems and then place our decimal. So for number 3, if I treat this as 2 whole numbers, I would have 9 times 8, which is 72. I do not need to carry over the 7 above the 0 because 8 times 0 is 0, and then you would just bring your 7 down anyway. So now to go to place my decimal, the 9 tenths has 1 digit behind the decimal. The 8 tenths has 1 digit behind the decimal. Adding that together would give me a total of 2 decimal place values in my answer. Again, I always circle that number so that way it's not blending in with my final answer. So from the end of the 72, 1, 2 to the left, places my decimal in front of the 7. And then because this is just a decimal answer, I do like to put a 0 in the ones place, but you do not have to if you choose not to. For number 4, multiplying like 2 whole numbers, I would have 5 times 5 is 25, drop my 5, carry my 2. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 2 is 22, drop my 2, carry my 2. 5 times 8 is 40, plus 2 is 42. I'm going to cross off everything I'm done with. And now I'm going to drop a 0, and then multiply the next 5 out. So again, 5 times 5 is 25, carry my 2. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 2 is 22, carry your 2. And 5 times 8 is 40, plus 2 is 42. Add my 2 partial products together. So 5 plus 0 is 5, 2 plus 5 is 7, 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 2 is 6, and bring down my 4. So now to place my decimal, my top factor has 1 digit behind the decimal. My bottom factor also has 1 digit behind my decimal. That does give me a total of 2 decimal place values that I have to have for my answer. So from the end of my answer, 1, 2 to the left does place my decimal in between the 4 and the 7. So 464 and 75 hundredths is my final answer. To make sure I have enough room, I am going to rewrite this next problem. So 2 and 39 hundredths times 2 and 7 tenths. Multiplying like I have 2 whole numbers first. So 7 times 9 is 63. Drop the 3, regroup the 6. 7 times 3 is 21. 21 plus 6 is 27. Drop the 7, regroup the 2. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 2 is 16. So now I'm going to cross off everything that I am finished with. And then I'm going to drop a 0, and then multiply the 2 out. So 9 times 2 is 18. Drop the 8, regroup the 1. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. And then 2 times 2 is 4. So next, I need to add my partial products together. Sorry, my board is acting up on me. So when I add these 2 partial products together, I have 3 plus 0 is 3, 7 plus 8 is 15, carry my 1, 1 plus 6 is 7, and then 7 plus 7 is 14, regroup my 1, and then 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 4 is 6. So now I have to place my decimal. I see the top factor has 2 digits behind its decimal. The bottom factor has 1 digit behind its decimal. So to add up the total number of decimal place values, 2 plus 1 is 3. So that means I need 3 decimal place values in my answer. So from the end of my number, swoop 3 to the left. So 1, 2, 3 to the left places my decimal in between the 6 and the 4. Again, it is a good idea to draw the arrow at the end so that way you know exactly where you're placing that decimal. So moving on to the next page, on your own, on page 273, you should pause, try to do a few on your own, and then check your answers with mine. And then if you need to keep pausing as you're working to keep checking your answers, that would be a good idea. So for number 6, I have 7 and 9/10 times 3 and 4/10. Multiplying like I have two whole numbers, 4 times 9 is 36. Regroup the 3. 4 times 7 is 28. 28 plus 3 is 31. Cross off everything I'm finished with and drop a 0. 3 times 9 is 27. Regroup my 2. 3 times 7 is 21. 21 plus 2 is 23. Add that together. 6 plus 0 is 6. 1 plus 7 is 8. 3 plus 3 is 6. And then bring down the 2. Now to place my decimal in my product, 1 digit behind the top factor, 1 digit behind the bottom factor. Add that together to get a total of 2 decimal place values in my final answer. So from the end of the 6, 1, 2 to the left, places it so that way I have 26 and 86 hundredths. For number 7, 9 and 2/10 times 5 and 6/10. 6 times 2 is 12. 9 times 6 is 54, plus 1 is 55. Cross off everything you're finished with. Drop a 0. 5 times 2 is 10. Carry my 1. 5 times 9 is 45, plus 1 is 46. Add the two partial products together. 2 plus 0 is 2. 5 plus 0 is 5. 5 plus 6 is 11. And then 1 plus 4 is 5. Now to place my decimal, my top factor has 1 decimal place value. My bottom factor has 1 decimal place value. So that does add up to give me a total of 2 decimal place values in my answer. So 1, 2 to the left for my product, and I would have 51 and 52 hundredths. For question number 8, I have 3 and 45 hundredths times 9 and 7/10. So 7 times 5 is 35. 7 times 4 is 28. 28 plus 3 is 31. 7 times 3 is 21. 21 plus 3 is 24. Cross off everything that I'm finished with. Drop a 0. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 4 is 36. 36 plus 4 is 40. 9 times 3 is 27. 27 plus 4 is 31. Add my two partial products together. So now I have 5 plus 0 is 5. 1 plus 5 is 6. 4 plus 0 is 4. 2 plus 1 is 3. And then I'm going to bring down the 3. So now to place my decimal, my top factor has 2 digits behind the decimal. The bottom factor has 1 digit behind the decimal. Add those together to get a total of 3 decimal place values in my answer. So swooping from the end, 1, 2, 3 to the left gives me a final answer of 33 and 465 thousandths. For question number 9, I have 45 and 3/10 times 8/10. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 2 is 42. 8 times 4 is 32. 32 plus 4 is 36. Now I do not have to multiply that 0 out because it would just give me a line of zeros. So I can just go ahead and place my decimal. So my top factor has 1 digit behind the decimal. My bottom factor has 1 digit behind my decimal. Add the place values together to get a total of 2 decimal place values for my final answer. So 2 to the left from the end of the number places my decimal in between the 6 and the 2 for 36 and 24 hundredths. For number 10, I have 6 and 98 hundredths times 2 and 5 tenths. Notice when you have decimals, they do not have to be lined up with our decimal to multiply it out, not like you have to for adding and subtracting. So for this one, we have 5 times 8, which is 40. 5 times 9 is 45, plus 4 is 49. 6 times 5 is 30, plus 4 is 34. Cross off everything you're finished with. Drop a 0. 2 times 8 is 16. 2 times 9 is 18, plus 1 is 19. 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 is 13. Add these together. 0 plus 0 is 0. 9 plus 6 is 15. 9 plus 1 is 10, plus 1 is 14. 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. And then drop down the 1. There are 2 digits behind my decimal in the top factor. 1 digit behind my decimal in the bottom factor, which gives me a total of 3 decimal place values that my answer has to have. So from the end, 1, 2, 3 to the left gives me 17 and 450 thousandths, or we could also write 17 and 45 hundredths. Either answer is acceptable. Remember, you do not need the 0 at the end on our decimals. And for question number 11, we have 7 and 2 hundredths, times 3 and 4 tenths. So 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 0 is 0, and 4 times 7 is 28. Cross off the 4, drop a 0. 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 0 is 0, 3 times 7 is 21. Add the partial products together. 8 plus 0 is 8, 0 plus 6 is 6, 8 plus 0 is 8, 2 plus 1 is 3, and then drop the 2. So now my top factor has 2 decimal place values. My bottom factor has 1 decimal place value. And that would give me a total of 3 decimal place values in my final answer. So from the end, 1, 2, 3 to the left gives me the final answer of 23 and 868 thousandths. So now for our homework. We are going to do the odd problems except for number 13 on the front. So we are going to solve 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. Notice for numbers 7 and 9, you do have to make sure you are stacking your 2 factors before multiplying. And remember, when you stack them, you do not have the decimals lined up. So for number 7, you would have 75 and 3 tenths times your 42 hundredths. Notice my decimals are not lined up. They do not line up when you are multiplying. And then for number 9, you would have 18 and 74 hundredths times your 7 and 5 tenths. Again, do not line up those decimals. For number 11, Aretha runs a marathon in 3 and 25 hundredths hours. Neil takes 1 and 6 tenths times as long to run the same marathon. How many hours does it take Neil to run the marathon? So we're going to take Aretha's time of 3 and 25 hundredths hours times 1 and 6 tenths to find Neil's time. moving on to the back for number 1 and number 2, that is from our lesson from today. So Sue buys material to make a costume. She buys 1 7/500 yards of red material. She buys 1 2/10 times as many yards of blue material. How many yards of blue material does Sue buy? So we have 1 7/500 times 1 2/10 to find the number of yards of blue material. For number 2, last week Juan worked 20 5/10 hours. This week he works 1 5/10 times as many hours as he did last week. How many hours does Juan work this week? So we're going to take 20 5/10 times 1 5/10 to find the number of hours Juan works this week. For number 3, we do have a number in expanded form, and we need to make sure we write that in standard form. Remember, the digit is being multiplied by the place value it's located in, so I strongly encourage you to use your place value charts as you are filling those digits in. Notice for the last 3 sets of parentheses, those are decimal place values, so that means that you will have a decimal. For number 4, Kelly buys a sweater for $16.79 and a pair of pants for $28.49. She pays with a $50 bill. How much change should Kelly get back? So first of all, you will have to figure out how much she's spending by adding together the cost of the sweater and the pants. So the pants were $28.49 plus the sweater, which was $16.79. When you find that answer, you need to take $50, and because we have change, we're going to have to put the .00 for our money minus whatever your answer is that you got from your addition. And then make sure you are borrowing correctly when you go to subtract this. For number 5, Elvira is using a pattern to multiply 10 to the third power times 37 2/10. So you just need to make sure you are paying attention to your pattern as they are solving it and do the correct number of swoops that your exponent tells you to do and in the correct direction from the decimal to find the product of 10 to the third power times 37 2/10. And finally, for number 6, what digit should go in the box to make the following statement true? So to help you figure this digit out, I would make sure you line your decimals up. And notice the digit that is in the tenths place is the missing digit from the second decimal. So to make this where the top number is smaller than the bottom number, you need to make sure you're filling in for the box a number that is bigger than 7. There are 2 different answers that can be accepted for this answer. Let us know if you have any questions. Bye.